Aloha from the East West Center in Honolulu, and mahalo to viewers around the world for tuning in to today's Gals with Lay Global Webinar, Leveling the Playing Field, Women in Sports. Gals with Lay leverages the Center's unique access to the world's policymakers, entrepreneurs, community leaders, and artists, virtually uniting these global forces with Hawaii's women leaders to harness their collective ambition, experience, and passion. Gals with Lay Global is intentionally dynamic and interactive. We will begin with our keynote panel, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. Open space will follow Q&A as an optional opportunity for attendees to meet the speakers at virtual roundtables and participate in an unmoderated informal dialogue for 10 minutes. Open space is a unique opportunity to engage and network as peers with our esteemed speakers and your fellow attendees. We encourage our audience to participate in and take advantage of the access open space provides. My name is Sarah Lamb, and I am the Gals with Lay Global Co-Coordinator. It's my pleasure to introduce the athletes, leaders, and advocates who will be discussing the issues of inequality affecting marginalized athletes, their efforts to improve the visibility of women, LGBTQI+, and para-athletes in sport, and best practices for promoting gender equity and successfully challenging the status quo. Alyssa Nakken is assistant coach for the San Francisco Giants and chair of the Giants' first resource group, Momentum, a women's network whose vision is to foster a genuine appreciation for and commitment to the empowerment of women. Paige Alms is a two-time Women's Surf League Big Wave World Champion and co-founder of the Committee for Equity in Women's Surfing, an organization seeking equality, inclusion, equal access, and equal pay in professional surfing. Melodie Robinson is General Manager of Sports and Events for TVNZ, New Zealand's national broadcaster, and a former international rugby union player for New Zealand. Kara Winger is a four-time Olympic javelin thrower and Director of Athlete Services at Parity, an online marketplace designed to direct endorsement funds to women athletes and close the gender pay gap in global sports sponsorship. Kaoru Nakayama is the founder and Secretary General of Paracan, a nonprofit organization in Japan that leverages the power of sports and serves as a bridge between those with disabilities and those without. Finally, Ann Lieberman is a three-time national champion Muay Thai fighter and Director of Policy and Programs for Athlete Ally, a nonprofit dismantling the structures of oppression that isolate, exclude, and endanger LGBTQI+ people in sport. And now I'd like to take a moment to share our webinar protocols. Today's keynote panel is on the record, recorded, and will be made available on YouTube for viewing and sharing. Each panelist will speak for up to 6 minutes. Viewers, your microphones and videos are turned off during the keynote. If you are experiencing difficulties with internet connectivity, AirMeet provides a low definition option at the bottom right of your screen. For the best attendee experience, please connect to AirMeet using the most up-to-date version of a Chrome browser. The webinar is also accessible through AirMeet's mobile app, available to download to any iPhone or Android device. Q&A will take place after panelists' remarks. To submit a question, you may either virtually raise your hand using the hand icon or use the Q&A function at the right of your screen. In either case, please specify which panelist you wish to answer. If you don't have a question of your own, you can also like a question asked by a fellow attendee. Questions with the most likes will be prioritized. Once Q&A concludes, viewers will have the option to meet our speakers by taking a seat at any roundtable of their choosing and participating in an unmoderated interactive discussion. We encourage you to share the space and your voice. Also join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag #GalsWithLay and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EWC Seminars. Finally, I am delighted to introduce today's moderator, Ginger Vaughn. Ginger is a lecturer at Rice University and a Changing Faces Seminar alum. She is also an avid mountaineer and the first American woman to have climbed Japan's 100 mountains. With that, I'll hand over the program to our moderator to offer brief contextualizing remarks. Ginger?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for that warm welcome. I'm so happy to be back to host this event. Welcome, everyone, to the East West Center's Gals with Lays Leveling the Playing Field event. And tonight we're focusing on women in sports. This is so exciting. I welcome the audience. Thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you to our guests tonight. We are excited to hear from you amazing female athletes, leaders, and advocates in sports. So I just want to bring us all on the same page here. We historically have seen this barrier and inequality in nearly every industry for women, and sports has been no exception. So, we're talking about disparity in pay, work conditions, unequal opportunities for growth, leadership, visibility, and representation. And so we're continuing to battle these challenges, and it's continues to be a huge imbalance in how women are treated in sports in terms of athletes as well as organizational leadership. Tonight we're going to talk about best practices, not only in ways to highlight this, but make some actual change. So while we know things have improved somewhat over the past 10 years or so, there continues to be this huge gender gap that extends not only from college athletes, but also to, the highest paid athletes. In professional sports, male athletes across the industry can make anywhere from 15 to 100% more than women athletes. And with the 2022 Olympics right here in front of us, as we prepare to watch and take that on, I think this is a great opportunity to really highlight the potential for change. So without further ado, I would like to pass it on to Alyssa Nakken to tell us a little bit about her experience.
Awesome. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. It's an honor to share this panel with these inspirational women leaders. My name is Alyssa Nakken, and I'm an assistant coach for the San Francisco Giants and was the first female hired as a full-time coach at the major league level. I get asked a lot if coaching in the big leagues was my childhood dream, but no, it was never a dream of mine because I never thought this career path existed, since I never saw anyone that looked like me in this sort of a position. I grew up playing all kinds of sports with and against my brothers and their friends. I never felt out of place when I was competing against boys, but society sort of steered me in the direction of switching over to just playing sports with girls as teammates in competition. So I never played baseball because that was the boys' sport. I would go on to play softball with just the girls. And I loved it. I had no dream of playing baseball because softball was already so fun for me. But as I was going through high school, my biggest dream was to play college softball, while my male classmates had dreams of playing professional baseball as their full-time career and be able to provide for their family by playing, travel the country competing, and really not have an end date as to when their dream would be over. Whereas I knew my dream would be over sometime in May of 2012 when I graduated college. There's no professional softball league that comes close to having the exposure nor the opportunities as the MLB. I went on to pursue a graduate degree from the University of San Francisco. USF doesn't have a softball team, they only have baseball. And I missed team competition. Office settings and the 9-to-5 work life just wasn't feeling right for me. So I just kept showing up to the baseball practices. I'd sit in the stands and I would study how the coaches interacted with the players. I watched them develop their drills and observed the ways in which they randomized their training. And I was fascinated. And I knew I wanted to get more ingrained into their culture and see where I could add value to their team as a member of the staff. I took an unpaid role with USF, and that was my first taste of coaching baseball. The next year, I joined the San Francisco Giants front office as an intern in baseball operations, where I was one of just 2 females in the entire department. As my internship went on, I was invited into more meetings and discussions involving the draft, the trade deadline, and the overall process for preparing our coaches and players for competition. I realized that the same male voices were the ones talking in all of these meetings. I could even visibly see others in the room hesitant to ask any sort of questions. And I noticed a lot of comments like, well, we've always done it this way. This is status quo. And I looked around and I really couldn't see where or how I was going to advance out of the intern level and into a full-time role anywhere in the baseball operations department if this was status quo. The following year, I stepped onto the business side of the organization and worked my way up through various roles, managing a variety of projects, and even started a much needed women's network employee resource group called Momentum. It was during the development of that passion project that I realized just how limiting my thinking had been for so many years. I didn't need to just limit myself to the current status quo roles outlined in the Giants organization. I knew I could find something that would be more fitting for where my desires were leaning, something back on the baseball side, on the field. In late 2019, Gabe Kapler was hired as our field manager. I set myself up to where I would cross paths with him regularly throughout the stadium. I would talk to him about the importance of diversity of thought and the need for leaders to surround themselves with people that are going to challenge their way of thinking if they truly want to advance their company, or in our case, win at the highest level. I went on to interview for the assistant coach position, and in 2020 was offered the job. I have job duties as an assistant coach, but I also have huge responsibilities to ensure that I'm not the only female coach on a major league staff for too much longer. I need to help smash down these doors and ceilings and clear the path for more women to get into these leadership positions. In order to successfully challenge the status quo, we must constantly do things that might feel uncomfortable on the outside, but feel so right on the inside. For me right now, it's pushing the Giants in Major League Baseball to better the female locker space in order to make it possible for women to prepare for work in a comfortable setting with the necessities, just like the men have. We must promote pay for women in sports so that they can provide for their family and travel the world competing, just like my high school male classmates dreamt about doing, while I limited myself to just thinking about a college career and nothing beyond it. We must increase the promotion of women in sports because then it gives young girls an opportunity to see all that there is to do in this world and prevents them from limiting their dreams. I look forward to our discussion this evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alyssa. I know that I have a million questions for you, and I know the audience, we're all dying to hear from you more. So we're going to hold those questions. But for now, we're going to move on to Paige Alms to share her experience and some insight. Paige?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's such an honor to be among these amazing women. Let me start off by introducing myself. I'm Paige Alms. I'm an ocean advocate, wave rider, animal lover, organic gardener, a pretty darn good cook, and someone who speaks up for things I'm passionate about, especially inequality issues. That being said, I'm also a 2-time Big Wave World Champion, 3-time Jaws Big Wave Invitational Champion, and yes, that means I truly enjoy riding 50-foot plus waves. I've been asked to share a bit about my involvement with the founding of the Committee for Equity in Women's Surfing, also known as CUES. CUES started with 6 women, 4 athletes who are the most decorated women in big wave surfing, who hold multiple world titles, big wave awards, and even a world record. Myself, Keala Kennelly, Andrea Moeller, and Bianca Valenti. These women are dear friends. We pick each other up when we're down, and we cheer loud to celebrate each other's successes. We love surfing big waves, and we really love using our athletic platforms we've built over the years to think beyond ourselves and bigger for our future generations. Add in, at the time, the president of the San Mateo County Harbor Commission, Sabrina Brennan, and an incredible badass lawyer, Karen Tynan, who created an amazing team. Together, this group of women, CUES, helped change the sport of surfing for men and women forever. 5 years ago, we had a competition at Jaws, the first of its kind. The first ever World Surf League big wave event that had men and women's divisions. And I won it. I won it the following year also. And I had won 2 world titles back to back off of only one event each winter season. And it just felt wrong. Sometimes waves take years and years to catch. So winning a world title off of just one contest, well, I felt I deserved it because it wasn't just one contest. It was years and years of hard work. And the event was at the biggest and best wave in the world. But when the guys had 3 events to make up a big wave tour and we only had 1, well, it just felt unfair. We aimed to change that. And by we, I mean our team, CUES. We decided that we wanted another event added for the women's tour, and it only seemed fitting that it be at the second best big wave in the world, Mavericks, which is in Half Moon Bay, just south of San Francisco. Bianca, who lives nearby and surfs Mavericks basically every time it breaks, knew that in order for us to have a chance to be in the big wave event at Mavericks, we needed to unify our voices. So we founded the Committee of Equity in Women's Surfing. Mavericks is this big wave in Northern California, and it's kind of a funny place. The wave has made us, it's been a star of multiple Hollywood films, and let's just say there's a lot of male bravado there. Only a very small handful of women have surfed Mavericks, literally maybe a dozen. We thought, how hard could it be? For sure the Mavericks event would want the women in it also. Having both the men and the women together brings so much value to the sport. Well, it turns out it was a little harder than we thought. Asking to be a part of the event wasn't quite enough. We kept hearing, women just aren't good enough. They don't sit in the bowl. They could drown. They're putting their lives at risk. I laughed every time I heard some of these comments because most of these comments were on social media from people that have never surfed a big wave in their life. And it made me think about the feeling that I had when I was a little girl and I would hear, the girls just aren't as good as the boys. And I kept thinking, are we still talking about this? The ocean knows no difference between a man or a woman. It delivers the same punishments, opportunities, and the same success. Our oceans do not compare, judge, or distinguish between gender. We had a huge challenge ahead of us. Hughes got really busy. We communicated with candor and respect very closely with the California Coastal Commission and the State Lands Commission. Both of these state-run departments all supported us. The ocean, the harbor, the access to this wave all know no difference between a man or a woman. The State Lands Commission then made it a requirement that in order for the event to run at Mavericks, the World Surf League would be required to not only have 2 heats for the women, but the prize money breakdown would be equal to the men's. The World Surf League were apprehensive on doing this, as doing this for one event would cause an uproar across all of their platforms. Their shortboard tour, the World Championship Tour, for sure they'd want the same, but the truth is they really deserved it too. So in September of 2018, just weeks before the start of the big wave season, the World Surf League announced the 2019 season and moving forward that they'd have equal pay for their male and female surfers across all of their tours. In doing so, they became the first US-based global sports organization to implement equal pay for their athletes. The news went all over the world. It made headline news and was the biggest announcement in surfing ever. We had helped create positive change, and that would impact the sport forever, and the feeling was surreal. This is just a tiny story from a tiny little sport that has since sparked a lot of conversations in other sports around the world. We had a challenge, and it started about us, and it quickly became something much bigger than ourselves. We wanted the men and women to have equal access to surfing locations and equal opportunity to showcase their talents. We wanted the little girls growing up now to know that they can make a living being a surfer, being an athlete. We wanted the next generation of boys to look at their female counterparts and see them as equals. We had a challenge and a strategy to overcome this challenge, and we went in and took action as a unified group. And believe me, it was hard, it was emotionally exhausting, and to be honest, I almost gave up multiple times. But the feeling a few months after that announcement, after one of my best friends won the world title and equal prize money for her win at Jaws, that feeling was priceless. I encourage you all listening to truly find something that you're passionate about, and don't be afraid to speak up when things aren't right. Life is unpredictable, extremely short. Find your people, think outside the box, bend the rules, formulate a plan, and try to have some fun while you're doing it.
Thank you, Paige. Such a heartwarming journey that you've been on, and it makes me feel optimistic that other sports can change too, to bring some leveling to the pay gap there for women in sports. And when you were mentioning about how people were saying, oh, girls aren't as good as boys, and I think everybody on the call just nodded their head at the same time, like we remember people saying that as when we were children, and they're still saying that, and it's just ridiculous and outdated. But I'm glad we're here to talk more about it and encourage others to keep pushing forward. So next speaker, I'd like to hear from Melodie Robinson.
Kia ora, everybody. I'm just going to, I apologise, I don't have a video. My camera, for some reason, is not working. So I do have a presentation, though, so I'm going to pop that up on the screen, and just give me a yell when you can see my face. Can everybody see that okay?
We can see it, Melodie.
Great. Okay, awesome. Well, kia ora koutou, everybody. I'd like to start by introducing myself as a former athlete, although it has been a long time since I pulled on the rugby boots. But yes, I'm very proud to have played for the New Zealand rugby team, who are known as the Black Ferns. I'm currently General Manager of Sports and Events at TVNZ, which is New Zealand's national broadcaster. That's us there. We have traditional television, a fantastic streaming and on-demand platform, onenews.co.nz, and contract hundreds of production companies to produce stories, drama, comedy, and reality TV in New Zealand. I'll touch on how I'm trying to commercialise women's sport on TV soon. I also dedicate my spare time, which I don't have much of because I've got children, to work on 3 rugby boards. One is World Rugby Limited, which governs the commercial aspects for World Rugby. I represent the international players and particularly the women's voice on that board. And I'm also on the Rugby Foundation board, who look after injured players, and on the board for my club, College Rifles. I'm a very busy person. But I wanted to tell you my story, and it does start with the Black Ferns. My story starts with this guy here. It's my dad. Like every other Kiwi male in the 70s and 80s, he really loved rugby. So I ended up watching a lot of rugby with him on the couch. And at the 1987 Rugby World Cup, it's a long time ago, I know, I had fallen in love with rugby and also, on the side, the captain, David Kirk. So I decided I was going to be an All Black. But one slight problem with that, I was a girl and girls couldn't be All Blacks in New Zealand. I kept that dream of playing rugby alive all through high school, and it wasn't until I got to Otago University to start a PE degree that I got the opportunity. It was my first week. I saw a notice, girls rugby players wanted, trial Saturday, dream come true. My friend and I nervously went down on the Saturday. There were 60 girls there. They were muscular, staunch, and they all looked like Ronda Rousey. I played for 60 minutes, and when the full-time whistle went, I limped off the field with blood pouring out of one knee, a sore shoulder, hematoma, and wounded pride. I wasn't particularly very good, but I decided I would give it a go. Now, back in the day, we played on Sundays. We'd hand-me-down old props jerseys, which looked like dresses. We had terrible referees. We had to buy our own strapping tape and everything else. My mum hated my new sporting pursuit, and nobody backed a bunch of girls playing rugby. But gosh, we had a fabulous time. We loved the game. We made lifelong friends. We learned about putting the team before yourself, forgiving mistakes, and being inclusive to different personalities and people. I finally made the New Zealand team in 1996. And guess what? My dad got to watch my debut. Now, I ended up being part of 2 very special Rugby World Cup wins with the Black Ferns. And while at the beginning people didn't accept women playing rugby, because we trained hard, we were fit, we looked like athletes, and we were playing great rugby and winning, it started to change people's perceptions. We won the World Cup in 1998, and for the first time we got faxes from fans in New Zealand, and our team was live on TV1. Then we won the World Cup in 2002. Some of the girls were getting recognised in the street, and we didn't have to pay for our strapping tape anymore. Since then, the Black Ferns have won the Rugby World Cup 5 times, the Olympic silver and gold medal. The Black Ferns have a higher winning record than the All Blacks, and in 2019 and 2020, before COVID hit, over 500,000 New Zealanders watched the Black Ferns live against Australia on their test matches on Sky TV. Plus, women are now getting paid to play full time. What progress we've made. Now, while I was there, rugby gave me a foot in the door at Sky TV. 2 fantastic producers took a punt on me. They gave me a job at Sky TV, a company I worked with for 15 years, traveling the country, traveling the world, talking rugby, presenting rugby. What a job. There's just some pictures of the Black Ferns there and their wonderful, beautiful powerfulness. However, there were some tough moments, and I just want to show you some of the comments that I would regularly get whenever I'd be on television. Look, there's some of my fun parts of the job. Now, the worst thing is that these types of comments are still being said about women on sports television right now. Her voice is too high. She looks fat. She's got no ankles. She's too skinny. Rumours about who you sleep with, or even one of my favourites, but she's married to a New Zealand cricketer. How can she do a credible interview with any cricketer? It is relentless. So how do we change that? How do we get equality for female athletes, women as accepted pundits on sports TV, and more women in power jobs in sports media? In 2017, after a scholarship program in the United States called the Global Mentoring Program, I founded a charitable organisation called the Wonderful Group, which is quite simply more diverse, more empowered, more women in sport media. The Wonderful Group isn't about pushing women into roles. Our purpose is to give women the support, training and skills to climb up the corporate ladder, to earn their spots, to be ready when they get the call up. The Wonderful Group's mentoring program has seen 4 new female hires on Sky Sport. Another 3 have been hired full-time as sports reporters at TV3, another gaining a full-time sports reporting role at stuff.co.nz. Our networking has seen at least another 6 women supported in contract negotiations. And we've had one of our senior producers who is struggling at one company, not getting the opportunities, hired at TVNZ as executive producer of the Paralympics. We've had another become the chairperson of the Women's Rugby World Cup Organising Committee. And last year, of course, TVNZ hired a woman for the first time as General Manager of Sports and Event, and that is me, a good old tomboy Māori girl from Banks Peninsula, former rugby player, boss of sports at TVNZ. How things have changed. We've even had an increase in women's sports coverage in this country because a large group of us are on the same journey at the same time, and we're collectively impacting. I'm so excited about the possibilities ahead in the next few years. At TVNZ, those opportunities include buying women's sports rights and putting them on television. We already did that with the Silver Ferns, our netball team, last year. We're also looking at shaping the market so we have different firms, broadcasters, sponsors working together to grow the audience and sponsors for women's sport. And we're investing in New Zealand data on why people really watch sports and events, research into the value use of sport, which will help us understand how to shape women's sports events. There is a lot more to come, so I'm really looking forward to answering some of your questions. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you, Melodie. I loved seeing your photos. I know that our audience has a lot of questions for you, not only as a professional rugby player and how you really help level the playing field in terms of equality, but also your experience as a sports broadcaster and how the discrimination kind of never ends, right? In terms of what we hear on your physical, how you look physically rather than your competence in your job. So yeah, I know that we're going to talk more about that, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insight.
Right.
Our next speaker, we're going to speak with Kara Winger, 4-time Olympian javelin thrower and Director of Athlete Services for Parity.
Thank you, Ginger. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Kara Winger, as our moderator said, and I have a little presentation as well. I do feel as though my contribution in this panel is on maybe a smaller scale, and I am totally okay with that. I feel like the problem is so massive that at every level we need to attack it. And it's been quite a journey as a javelin thrower, and more recently, I get to serve the community that I'm still a very, very passionate member of. So I'm Kara Winger. I throw the javelin and have done so since my freshman year of high school in Vancouver, Washington, where I grew up. I also spent 3 years from 7 to 10 years old as a resident of Kailua, Hawaii, and absolutely loved that time in my life. I really remember that being the first place I lived, and just kind of this view of the world as someone who moved a lot with my family. I live in Colorado Springs currently and have lived there for 9 years, which is the absolute longest I've ever lived anywhere. So as a child who was always the new kid, I played sports to make friends. The wild thing about that is that when I started throwing the javelin my freshman year, it was the last sport I tried. I was immediately good at it. I got second in state that year, won the next 3 years, went to college for it, then became an Olympian before I left Purdue University in 2008. And then have been to the next 3 Olympics after that. So sports were where I went to make friends as a shy kid. And then ultimately in Tokyo 2020, this past summer, those friends that I had made, those women that I felt connected to in such a powerful way through some really difficult personal disappointments. I was injured many times. I actually competed with my original God-given ACL in 2008. In 2012, that top right picture, I had no ACL as I tore it at the Olympic trials. In 2016, I had my first surgical ACL, which is the blue uniform just underneath that American flag. And that was the best I did. I got 13th at the Olympic Games in qualifying, and unfortunately 12 make the final. So I am actually the furthest ever distance at the Olympic Games to not be an Olympic finalist. And in Tokyo, I was 11 months post-surgery on my second ACL tear. So same leg, and just not quite the dream. So when the women of USA Track and Field elected me team captain in Tokyo after I had, in the midst of my own disappointment, been so honored to witness their success, and that turned into being closing ceremonies flag bearer for them, despite never being on the podium, never being someone that you would think would get that honor, I was just amazed and blown away, and I will never feel so valued by people who didn't have to value me. So that is my javelin career. This is my final season as a javelin thrower, and I'm very excited to finish strong, finish in a way that is just super fun. I cannot believe that it's been 20 years of this incredible career. And like I said, Tokyo was more than I ever could have imagined in ways that I never thought would happen to me. And I don't know what it feels like to win a medal, but I know how incredible it feels to be part of a team that lets you know that they care about you. So that is what I'm really enjoying doing, working for fellow women at Parity. Parity was launched in 2020, June of 2020, in the midst of pandemic life. I think that did us some favors in terms of women looking for connection and funds. The global sports sponsorship market is projected to be an $83 billion market. Some of the statistics that we have in terms of where money goes to women in the world in that market say that only 0.04% of that global market goes to women. In 2011, when that statistic came from, that was a $66 billion market, and that meant that percentage is still true, that less than 50 cents for every $100 goes to women. We're trying to fix that. I kind of started USATF and USOPC, Olympic and Paralympic Committee, Athletes Advisory Committee volunteer work in 2020 as well. And my Parity opportunity really coincided with that volunteer work. So my official title is Director of Integrated Influencer Marketing. And I love, like I said, serving my fellow women athletes with experience that is so fresh in my mind to get them great opportunities that fit what they're interested in, how they can genuinely advertise products, ideas, really just kind of the sky is the limit in terms of showing the world that as someone who is very much in a niche sport, there are so many valuable women in so many niche sports that are just primed to do great things for brands that really match who they are as people. And I just think the richness of who women have to be professional athletes and to be really high level athletes in the face of the absolute uphill climb that it is, leaves so much space for them to be used better in these advertising campaigns in these like very impactful ways and get paid at the same time. So it's been quite an honor. I was their sponsored athlete last year and continue in that role and will continue in that role when I retire at the end of this season. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me again. And I look forward to answering questions.
Kara, thank you for sharing your journey. I can relate to being that shy kid going into sports. I think a lot of us went into sports to meet friends and found out that we were better at some things than we thought. So thanks for sharing your story. And also, for you to use the time during the pandemic for creating such a powerful organization already, Parity, that's amazing. We'd love to hear more, so we will come back to you. Thank you. And our next speaker is Kaoru Nakayama, Secretary General and founder of Parakan. in Chiba, Japan.
Hi. Hello. Let me share just a photo. Oh, no. Sorry, it didn't work well. So why don't I just start? Well, thank you very much for having me here. I'm so excited. The subject is female on the sports. However, I would like to talk to disabilities in sports. Well, in a way, if women are treated as minorities, disabled people are also minorities. Well, let me talk about myself a bit. I guess I was a troubled child in Japan. I did not like the society norm. Okay, every corner I turn, everybody is like asking for gender and age and the norm. And, since you are such and such age, you should be able to do this. You have to do this. Since you're a girl, you should do this, you do that. And then I was always feeling so uncomfortable. Why should girls do that? Should boys do that? I had friends in school, but I didn't feel comfortable enough. So at the age 18 or so, I decided to go to college in the US. I did not want to spend any more time in Japan. I was feeling so awkward. And I started school at University of Delaware, and there I found freedom for me. Freedom was a choice, my own will, not gender, age, and norm, none of those. I finally felt good about myself. I realized I was suffocating in Japan. I had no intention coming back to Japan, but I encountered with Paralympic 1996. When I saw Paralympic in Atlanta, I realized there are more kids like me in Japan suffocating, suffering, warring, and feeling left out from the society. Also, people with disability are feeling the same, I thought. So that's why I started my organization, Paracan. I really wanted to change the society. In order for us to change the society, we have to start from education in a younger age. I take para athletes into regular schools, elementary, junior high, high school, and sometimes to college. Students can learn so much from para athletes. Two biggest thing is freedom and disability is not personal issue, but social issue. Byproduct of this program was self-esteem of para athletes went up so high. They were feeling themselves as a liability of the society, but they realized they are asset of the society. We visit about 80 to 120 schools a year and do 120 to 50 programs. From the letters we get from kids, I realize that we are right. Kids are feeling so much better after attending our program. This is in 2022, but still many sports gyms do not accept people with disability. Reason is that wheelchair might damage the floor, or if they get injured, who's going to take responsibility? The society thinks people with disability cannot take responsibility. That is not true. That is the biggest mistake. They misunderstanding. So I really think we need to change society so every single one of us can do what we want to do to change society. I would like to spread this program, and I am hoping one day all kids in elementary school will take this program and learn they could do better in their lives. I am so thrilled that they would come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kaoru-san. I think we all felt your emotion there in that sharing of the, the kind of the oppression and the suffering you felt. And I know we will have some more questions from the audience. We have a lot of international audience members here, and I know that some are from Japan as well that also share your thoughts. So thank you for sharing your experience. Moving on to our next panelist, we have Ann Lieberman, who is a 3-time national champion Muay Thai fighter and director of the Policy and Programs Athlete Ally out of Brooklyn, right, Ann?
Correct. Hi, everyone. So I think it's good morning, good afternoon, but good evening for me. I'm coming to you from the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, or Crown Heights in Brooklyn, New York. I am a trans non-binary person. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the director of policy and programs for Athlete Ally, the chair of USA Muay Thai's very new Gender Equality Commission. I'll talk about that momentarily, and a 3-time national Muay Thai champion and coach. And just, I feel so inspired having heard everyone speak. So it's my job to keep the energy up, bring up the rear before we get to questions. So I'm a lifelong athlete. My mother will deny this, but she tried putting me in ballet at a very early age and realized that I did nothing in the entire class, and I just waited to get the popcorn ball at the end. And so she thought, okay, that's not going to work. I have to put my child in something else. And so she took me to a Tang Sudo class, which is a Korean martial art similar to Taekwondo. And I did that all growing up, and then eventually found Muay Thai. And so I've been doing Muay Thai for over a decade, training, coaching, fighting, actually probably close to 2 decades now. I keep saying over a decade, but it's much longer than that. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the United States. And when I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh was a very different place than it is today. And I didn't always have the language for who I was in terms of my sexual orientation or my gender identity. And what consistently really saved me again and again was access to sports. And I played team sports. I played them very badly, and that is not my being self-deprecating. I was very bad at both basketball and lacrosse, but it didn't really matter that I was bad, because for an hour each day, the bullying stopped, everything fell away, and I got to be in my body and feel like myself. And even when I didn't know what that meant or how to articulate that to other people. And then when I found martial arts, I became even more strong and confident and connected to myself and to who I am. And I think many of us probably on this panel have gotten the strength and power and leadership from, the access we've had to sport at such an elite level. And so that is really why I've dedicated my life and career to making sure that sports can be safe and equitable for everyone. And so I do that through my work at Athlete Ally and through USA Muay Thai's Gender Equality Commission. The Muay Thai is going to be the next Olympic sport. It's new. We're going to be in the World Games for the first time this summer, so it's very exciting. And so the Gender Equality Commission is also something that is very nascent. And so the majority of what we're doing right now is really trying to increase gender diversity in officiating and coaching in the US and beyond. So it's really something that we're trying to build from the ground up, because there's just not representation of women and non-binary people in officiating. We have probably 2 or 3 referees and officiants in the US right now. So that work is also connected to the work that I do at Athlete Ally. And so this was mentioned briefly in the introduction, but at Athlete Ally, we work to dismantle the structures of oppression that isolate, exclude, and endanger LGBTQI plus people in sport. And we do that in 4 primary ways. So the first is through education. And so that's essentially making sure that the folks who have the most power and influence in sport actually have access to high quality education about building inclusive environments for athletes, for coaches, for sport governing bodies, et cetera. The second major area of our work is around sport policy advocacy. So how do we ensure that the policies that govern sport actually reflect the diversity of people playing sport? Because we know this sitting on this panel today that they often do not. Third major bucket is around research. So how do we ensure that there's a rigorous body of knowledge about LGBTQI plus athletes and activism in sport? And then the last big piece of our work is around athlete activism. All of you are living examples of this here today, that athletes, as we've heard in the US, should never be told just to shut up and dribble, that athletes have and always will be significant contributors to society and to social change. And really what undergirds all of this work is the belief that homophobia, transphobia, and interphobia are weapons of sexism, and that harmful beliefs around masculinity cause those who fall outside of what some deem normal to be isolated and targeted. So we're committed to really recognizing and combating the various ways that sexism is manifested in sport and in society as a whole. And so a lot of what we're working on right now is also focused on trans and non-binary inclusion in sport and stopping the really vicious attacks that are happening on trans kids in sport right now across the United States. And I will say, you know, what has been heartbreaking for me doing this work, and as somebody who grew up living, eating, breathing women's sports and still do, just how unsafe an environment sports in general has become for our kids. And I just want every single person to have the life-saving access to sports that I have had. And I want every young woman and girl in sports to thrive. And for me, that absolutely includes trans women and girls and non-binary folks. So thrilled to be here with you all tonight. Excited for your questions and to connect. So thank you all so, so much.
Thank you, Anne, for sharing your experience and really, going deep into some of the vulnerable parts of your childhood and in terms of what you had to suffer and realizing that you weren't the only one. And, your efforts these days to promote the visibility of LGBTQI and others, and not only highlight those important stories, but share the importance of making something happen now. Especially while, you had mentioned Muay Thai is now an Olympic sport, and it is an important time for people to see that you can't just put a label on something and tell it to go away. So thank you all to all of our guests for sharing your insights. I know we're going to get a ton of questions, so I'm waiting for them to filter in here. But while I wait for them to all come in, I just want to kick us off and ask a few questions. I wanted to start out with Alyssa Nakken. And Alyssa, I had written some notes down while you were speaking, and you had mentioned that when you were in college, you really thought that your professional coaching career would be over after college. Like there really wasn't any way for you to guarantee a longevity in that, but you kept on pushing. You studied those mentors around you, and you kind of put yourself in the right space at the right time. What kind of advice would you give other women, young women who are looking at a similar career path, who, you know, they don't know how to get over that hurdle, and, you know, some advice in terms of career success?
I think it's really important to surround yourself with a really strong and positive support system and network, whether that's your family, your colleagues, your mentors, or just, you know, really any other kind of role model that you have in your life. And I think what's really important when finding that network and leaning into them is that you're not just surrounded by people that are going to pat you on the back and tell you, yes, you can do anything you want, and you can, you know, anything you put your mind to, it's yours. You really need to find those people that are going to challenge you and really hold you accountable as you're making your way up through your career. You're going to have a lot of setbacks. That's life. And you're going to find a lot of twists and turns throughout your career. I don't think I've met one person that has had a dream and their path was straight towards that dream. There's a lot of curveballs that life will inevitably throw your way. And it's really important that you're able to understand those and kind of just stay very present in that. And then also just, again, have those people around you that are going to kind of help you look at things in a different way, and also challenge you and consistently expect you to raise the bar in every chapter of your life.
Excellent. Thank you. I think everybody on the call listening to the uncertainty there, and then the way you were able to overcome that, and also, you know, now that you were in the spotlight and you were really working hard to get other women on board and to encourage them to have an opportunity like you have. I think that's amazing what you had said too about not wanting to move on without making sure that there were other women with the same kind of opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, it's it means nothing if you're the first and you're the only. And so there's a lot of women in baseball right now, and we just need to continue to kind of break down these barriers and get these women in higher positions and really change the game.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, so I have some questions coming in, and I'm going to ask Paige. So the question we have, Paige, is the Committee for Equity in Women's Surfing led the way in ensuring prize equity in surfing here in the U.S. Is the committee helping other countries to do the same, to follow suit?
Yeah, so to just clarify that, committee worked with the California Coastal Commission and the State Lands Commission. But the World Surf League is a global sports organization. They're just based in America. So all of their competitions that they have are all around the world: Australia, Europe, the US mainland, Hawaii, Africa, and South America. So it's all over the world, and they are paying equally on their championship tours. The Committee for Equity in Women's Surfing actually dissolved last year. We're all still in touch with each other and continue to do work. But the four of us athletes have actually, we decided to dissolve. It was just time. We did a lot of hard work, and it was years and years and years of hard work. And it was just time to move forward in different directions. So the four of us are currently coming up with something new, and we want to kind of focus more of our attention on bringing equal opportunities to kids in sport, and that's kind of been my focus. And I think that you know, what we went through with surfing, I hope that that'll be the set standard coming. You know, I know it's still not the same in a lot of different sports, so I'd like to see that happen. everywhere. And I mean, the athletes part of the committee, we're all still together, and we're happy to help with whatever we can. It was just time to dissolve the committee as a whole.
Well, usually when you have to dissolve something, it ends up because of an unfortunate reason. But in your case, there wasn't a need for it anymore because you had achieved the goal, right? So I think other sports can look at that and say, okay, well, maybe that is the goal too, that we're not constantly having to have this battle because it's on par where it should be. So that is good news. And yeah, your whole story is uplifting. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, so my next question goes to Nakayama-san, Kaoru-san. Can you share, so the question is, can you share what is being done to address the limitation and improve lives for disabled Japanese people, specifically in sports? Kaoru-san, your mic is off.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. We meet about 10 to 15,000 kids every year. And let's take one person. We met him when he was third grade. So it's like 10 years old or so. And he just had an accident and he was so discouraged. He did not want to do anything. But after meeting a program, he started doing so many different sports, including hockey, wheelchair basketball, climbing, and now he's 16. He's 16 years old and a national team member for sledge hockey. And another boy is now he's 15, and I met him when he was in elementary school. Usually, kids with a disability cannot participate in school sports programs, but he joined the baseball club in junior high school, and usually that doesn't happen, but he joined as a manager and he became real part of the team. So they are so encouraged, inspired, and thus people around them are so inspired by them. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you feel like in the last, you were saying you were in the United States and you really didn't want to come back to Japan, but what is your feeling currently and how that has changed? Do you feel like it's moving quicker now that there is more of a spotlight on para athletes?
Yeah, because 2020, actually 2021. However, still, kids with disability do not participate in any sports because there is no place for them to go to. That's the biggest challenge we are facing right now. As I said, like all the public gymnasium, that they'll accept everybody but people with a disability because they cannot take responsibility when they get injured or when they damage the floor, something like that. So it's getting better. It is getting better, but should be better than now, I think. So yeah, equal opportunity for disabled people. That's what I think.
Well, I know that, Japan has a lot of work to do still. I lived in Japan on and off for about 15 years, and even a lot of the barriers to buildings and accessibility, whenever travelers visit. I think that's one of the big complaints. So I can imagine it's such a even bigger challenge and hurdle for those who do have disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, so moving on, I have another question here, going to Melodie. Is Melodie here?
I am.
Okay, so my question is, there's a debate happening in Australia at the moment with regards to professional and non-professional women's sporting representation and remuneration. Could I get your thoughts about equal pay for women in rugby, in sport?
Yeah. So it's quite simple when it comes to rugby in New Zealand, because you can look on paper and have a look at the results, particularly in the last 3 years. The Black Fern Sevens team, which is the women's sevens, have won more tournaments, more World Seven Series, and have bigger stars than the men's team by a long shot. So absolutely, the argument is there for pay parity, and in fact, you could actually give that team more. The New Zealand Rugby Union is funded by Sport NZ on the back of Olympic gold, silver or bronze, and that team has won more than the men's. So they are holding their own, and if you look at, I guess, everything that they've done, they're professional, they've got really strong culture, and they're winning, and also, most importantly, they're authentically themselves. They market themselves through their own social media, and they have actually, alongside other very passionate and supportive media and sponsors, built that brand up for the New Zealand Women's Sevens team. The 15s team is the same. They've actually had, as I mentioned, a higher winning record than the All Blacks. The problem with this is that I call it a chicken and egg in the chick scenario, because to get women's professional sport paid in the same way as men's, we need the same media coverage, we need the same broadcast rights deals, we need the same competitions, and we need sponsors who know about the athletes and are willing to put the investment into them. And then add to that, you also need the government legislation and research from academics to fill in the rest of the gaps, to make sure that people know how great these sports are and that they are accessible. So for the 15s side, they haven't had the competitions since COVID hit. They hadn't played one game of rugby, and the All Blacks went out and played their normal competitions, and the New Zealand Rugby Union did everything they possibly could to make sure the All Blacks got all of their games, with the women languishing. So that's the first thing. I think that, their funding will start to get smaller if they don't put a line in the sand, the New Zealand Rugby Union, in terms of making sure those competitions are right up there. So, yeah, I'm 100% with pay parity, and I feel that because I'm a key person in sports acquisitions in a broadcast environment, that I can do my bit, which is influence and convince my fellow executives and workers that we should be investing in women's sports rights. So that's just one tick on those various chicken, egg, and chick scenarios I was talking about.
Thank you. Just had a quick, out of my curiosity, just a quick follow-up question with that. Are you seeing a lot of media influencers kind of put some hype behind women's rugby to give a boost to it?
Yeah, actually, the first time I saw that was 2017, when all of these crusty old men who had been sports journalists ignoring women's rugby for so long watched the Women's Cup and went, oh my goodness, they're actually really good, and they started writing about them. So yes, we've got influencers like an athlete called Ruby Tui, who's a women's sevens player, who creates her own content on various different platforms, and she did that off her own back, and she is absolutely a big star. She's been a massive influence. But you know what, yes, we need our people who follow women's sport, we need our female athletes, but most importantly, we need the key power brokers who make the decisions in the broadcasting rights and also the coverage of media. So that means we have to win men over as well.
Yeah, and it's about time, right? There is no time like the present. So thank you, Melodie. We have about 10 minutes left of questions. So I'm just going to ask as many as I can from the audience, because I know that they are really excited to hear from you from the source, and I want to give them that time. So let's move on to Kara Winger. We have a question here that says, it seems you've encountered people in the media realm that do not believe in the value of women athletes. What do you say to them, and what actions can we all take to help change the narrative that persists in our industry?
Great question. It kind of goes along with what Melodie was saying about media coverage. So if you don't see someone, that doesn't mean they're not awesome. And I really think that the message there is, like, with media coverage, like, how can we be creative to get women's sports actually viewable by fans who very clearly want to see them, and measure them in a way that is accurate for what that viewership is. So if they're not available on TV, you can't say that there isn't viewership of that sport, because it's literally not possible to measure that. It is not provided. So similarly with these like smaller followings, women that are in sports that don't necessarily get that mainstream media coverage, you know, as an Olympian, I have watched the machine of, you know, deciding what the stories are going to be in the United States long before the Olympics actually happen. And Paralympics are exactly the same for that matter. Not only is their coverage less, but their stories are predetermined by the media outlets that are telling those stories. And there are rules in place to kind of prevent viewership of like these little known people anyway. So really my mission is to help women learn how to tell their story the best and get into positions that brands will see that value. So like, you know, we're still fighting this uphill battle of we kind of, whether you're a minority or just a disadvantaged person, disenfranchised person, like woman in this case of sports, we have to do things, you know, 10 times better sometimes than our male counterparts to get maybe the same opportunity, or to even prove that we're going to be great in those roles. And so that's really what I try to enable the athletes to do in my position. Like I can, you know, help them really check all of the boxes of whatever the opportunity is that I'm bringing to them. And hopefully that's just a snowball effect of seeing it work and seeing it happen more and more. Because it's really fun to tell the amazing stories of the women that I get to work with.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So moving on, we have next question to Alyssa. Having smashed glass ceilings, do you feel privileged or pressured to succeed because you were groundbreaking as females in your respective position? And do you feel under more pressure than your male counterparts?
Yeah, good question. I think sometimes yes. And then there are days where I do come back and stay within myself and really understand the value that I add to our team and this organization day in, day out. I'm also very fortunate of the staff and the leaders that I'm around on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's just a lot of pressure on us, especially in Major League Baseball, that we do have to succeed. We have to win as much as we can day in, day out. And so there certainly are days or moments where I feel like I have to do a little bit more to prove my worth, or, you know, just to make sure like I'm still on the radar compared to some of my male counterparts. However, over the course of the last couple of years, I've gained a lot more confidence and kind of gotten over some of the insecurities that I first started out with. And I know the value that I can bring to a player and a team. And so I'm really confident and very sound in the position that I'm in. And I know that if I stay consistent in my preparation and I'm dedicated to finding out the answers and pushing forward, then I know that I'm going to have success.
What do we say to other women coaches who are looking to level up, and when they are being discriminated against, or, you know, being kind of bashed for breaking the rules per se?
Yeah, I think you have to find the right organization that will support you. You're going to face a lot of doors that get shut in your face as you're trying to break through them. And there's other organizations out there that are looking to diversify their coaching staffs because they're understanding the incredible value that women can bring to a staff. But I would say just keep pushing forward and understand that you are worthy, you are enough, and to stay committed to pushing forward and knocking down some of those doors that inevitably will be shut in your face because you're not a man.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have 5 more minutes of questions, so please continue to send those in. Next question goes to Paige. Sorry, next question goes to Anne. You there, Anne?
I am here. Hello.
Hello. Sorry, my screen's a little glitchy, so I'm working through it. And so the question is from an audience member. I've been following the story of Leah Thomas, transgender female athlete competing on UPenn's women's swim team. I was hoping you'd be willing to share your thoughts on her situation and the criticism backlash she has received, reaction from the media, and how it ties to the larger conversation on transgender women in sports.
Sure. It's going to be a lot to cover in 4 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. And I hope this will be the start of the conversation. So folks, please feel free to continue the conversation. So Leah is a young woman. She's a college athlete. And just like every single other athlete, sometimes Leah wins, sometimes Leah loses. Leah is a very good swimmer. She's a very strong swimmer. She was a strong swimmer pre-transition. So it was clear that she was going to be a strong swimmer post-transition. There have been a lot of conversations tonight about media narratives and the way the media predetermines a lot of what is said about particular athletes or the pictures that are painted. And I think Leah is absolutely a victim of some very intense, transphobic and quite honestly, violent media narratives. Leah has been, the center of tabloid headlines. She has been dead named. There have been a lot of really, really awful things to watch her go through. And at the same time, there have been some really amazing and positive things like the support from her teammates. And actually, this is perfect timing. We just worked with over 300 current and former NCAA swimmers, Team USA swimmers and Olympians to put together a letter of support for Leah and urging the NCAA, which is the governing body in the United States that oversees college athletics and eligibility and a whole host of things, to essentially not adopt a discriminatory policy from USA Swimming. And it's been a very intense uphill battle, especially for, an athlete who she followed every single rule, all of the eligibility criteria that have been in place for 10 years for trans women in NCAA sports. And I think the bottom line is that trans athletes, non-binary athletes, it's okay for us to participate in sports, but it's not okay for us to succeed. And I want us to get to a place where all athletes, no matter their gender identity, can be successful, and for it to not be about spreading misinformation about trans people, which is really what a lot of these conversations have been about. And the last piece I'll say on this is, the hyper focus and emphasis on Leah is very much a political tool and tactic. The majority of people who are having these conversations about quote unquote protecting women's sports don't care about anything we're talking about tonight. And I want to make that very clear. Not about pay equity, not about sexual harassment and assault in sports, not about equal representation of women coaches. And so this has really become a distraction from the very real expressed challenges that all of us are talking about this evening.
Thanks, Dan. But you really do bring that to light. The violence, the discrediting, the negative hype on media, the misinformation. Those things aren't the things we should be having to worry about, right? We should be worrying about the other things. But these are critical issues, and I feel like forums like this allow us to dig deeper and have us challenge ourselves on ways that we can make people accountable for their behavior, right? Because there's so much anonymity in ways that people can spread information without being held accountable. So it's so dire. I think Sarah jumped on. I think that's my cue to wrap up the Q&A. Everybody, thanks so much. Thanks to all the panelists for sharing your personal stories and your journeys in sports, the successes as well as the hardships. And thank you to the audience for some amazing questions. We got so many questions, and I'm sorry that we couldn't go through all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Sarah.
Mahalo to our viewers for submitting so many excellent questions, and to our panelists for their thoughtful responses. While we have reached the end of Q&A, I encourage you to continue the discussion during open space. To participate in open space, simply remain online and take a seat at any available roundtable for an unmoderated interactive discussion amongst peers. The center would also like to extend a warm mahalo to our moderator, Ginger, and to our keynote panelists, Alyssa, Paige, Melodie, Kara, Kaoru, and Anne. The center is honored to host such an esteemed panel. Thank you as well to our partners, Hub Co-working Hawaii, Under My Umbrella, JWI Ecosystem, Blue Startups, ASU Global Futures Lab, We Empower, Pacific Business News, Women in Sport Aotearoa, IWG Women and Sport, YWCA Oahu, La Pietra, and Girl Scouts of Hawaii. Finally, thank you to our viewers for attending Gals with Lay Global. Check our website for webinar information, registration, full speaker bios, and YouTube links at www.eastwestcenter.org/galswithlay. We hope today's discussion has left you with a sense of leadership, entrepreneurship, and inspiration, and we look forward to welcoming you back for the Gals with Lay Forum in Hawaii this July 2022. And for those of you who wish to meet with today's panelist and moderator, please remember to remain online and join one of the roundtables for open space. Mahalo, and I'll see you soon.